An entire family vanished on a road trip, but a hidden camera in a gas station reveals the shocking truth. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The sun streamed through the kitchen window of 247 Maple Street, casting golden rectangles across the worn wooden table where Michael Whitman flipped star-shaped pancakes with practiced precision. At 6:35 a.m. on a Sunday in July, Cedar Mills maintained its characteristic silence, broken only by distant birdsong and the occasional whoosh of Michael's spatula. "So we'll take Route 26 out of town, then connect to the interstate after lunch," Michael said, adjusting his thick-framed glasses. "Should put us in Twin Falls by nightfall if we make good time." Sarah nodded, her attention divided between her husband's words and the meticulous green folder splayed open before her. "I've called ahead to confirm our reservation. The hotel has a pool for the kids." Her fingers traced the highlighted route on the map, pausing briefly when a car rumbled past their house. She glanced toward the window, her shoulders relaxing only when the vehicle continued down Maple Street. "Mom, Dad, is breakfast ready yet?" Lucas burst into the kitchen wearing his favorite Superman t-shirt, the same one he'd insisted on packing for their trip, despite Sarah's gentle reminder that they'd be gone for 2 weeks. At 8 years old, Lucas Whitman was a perpetual motion machine, already bouncing on his heels as though the pancakes might materialize faster if he increased his own kinetic energy. "Almost done, buddy," Michael responded, sliding another perfectly formed star onto the growing stack. "Could you check if your sister's awake?" Before Lucas could respond, 6-year-old Emma appeared in the doorway, clutching her well-worn cloth doll, Lily, whose pink dress precisely matched Emma's own. "Lily says she's hungry too," Emma announced solemnly, climbing onto her chair. Sarah closed her folder and swept it aside, making room for the family breakfast. "Everyone excited about seeing the ocean?" she asked, pouring orange juice into 4 glasses. "So excited," Lucas exclaimed, dramatically spreading his arms. "Tommy next door doesn't believe I'll find alien seashells, but I told him the Pacific Ocean has totally different creatures than the Atlantic." Later that morning, while Michael organized their color-coded suitcases in the master bedroom, Sarah retreated to the small home office. She ran her finger down the extensive checklist she'd been refining for months. Accommodations confirmed, route alternatives mapped, emergency contacts updated. As she checked off each item, a small measure of tension released from her shoulders. The sharp ring of her phone made her start. Sarah exhaled slowly when she saw her mother's name on the screen. "Hi, Mom," she answered, forcing lightness into her voice. "Just checking if you're still planning to leave tomorrow," Carol Reynolds said. "I've been watching the weather reports for your route. Looks clear all the way to Nevada." "That's good to hear," Sarah replied. "And yes, we'll be on the road by 7. I'll call you tomorrow night when we reach the hotel." "You always do," Carol said warmly. "Every night since you moved to Cedar Mills, my clockwork daughter." Sarah laughed softly. "Some habits are worth keeping." In the afternoon, Lucas stood by the kitchen calendar, marker in hand, dramatically crossing out the penultimate day before their departure. 16 hours and 23 minutes until we leave, he announced, having calculated the time with mathematical precision unusual for his age. "Someone's been practicing their time calculations," Michael observed, entering the kitchen with Emma in tow. Lucas beamed. "Ms. Collins says I'm good with numbers. Maybe I'll be an astronaut mathematician when I grow up." As the day progressed, Sarah moved through the house with deliberate steps, checking windows and doors with casual-seeming glances. When Michael entered the kitchen unexpectedly, the small gasp that escaped her lips was quickly masked by a smile and a question about dinner plans. By 4:30 p.m., the family had gathered in the living room to watch a documentary about the Pacific Coast. Michael sat with a notebook, jotting down potential stops not included in Sarah's meticulously planned itinerary. "We could add this tide pool. It's only 15 minutes off our route near Monterey," he suggested. Sarah nodded, though her eyes occasionally drifted to the windows as the afternoon light began to fade. The doorbell rang at precisely 5:15 p.m. "That must be Diane," Sarah said, rising quickly. Diane Peterson, their neighbor and Sarah's closest friend in Cedar Mills, had agreed to look after the house during their absence. "The orchid in the office needs exactly 3 ice cubes every Wednesday," Sarah explained as they moved through the house. "Not 2, not 4, 3. Diane laughed. "You've told me 3 times now, Sarah. The plants will be fine." Later, while Michael secured the Airstream trailer to their Ford Explorer in the driveway, Sarah slipped upstairs to the bedroom. From her dresser, she removed her personal cell phone and hesitated before placing it in a box at the back of her closet. She then unwrapped a brand new phone, still in its packaging, and slipped it into her purse. Dinner that evening was festive, a pepperoni pizza that Michael dubbed the last Cedar Mills pizza for 2 weeks. They clinked their juice glasses together in a toast to the best vacation ever. Lucas's enthusiasm so infectious that even Sarah's smile reached her eyes, momentarily banishing the shadows that had lingered there for weeks. As night fell, Michael read The Ocean Girl to Emma until her eyelids grew heavy. Lily clutched tightly against her chest, dreams of seashells and adventures already dancing behind her closed eyes. At 11:40 p.m., with the house finally silent, Sarah returned to the office. Her fingers moved methodically across the keyboard, deleting files, emptying digital trash bins. She paused briefly on a folder labeled PharmaCorp before permanently erasing it, a shadow crossing her face. From her purse, she withdrew a small thumb drive, glancing toward the doorway to ensure she was alone. With careful movements, she hid it in the lining of a desk drawer, whispering to herself, "Just in case, no one will find us there." The green folder closed with a soft snap as Sarah tucked the thumb drive deeper into the drawer lining. She stood for a moment in the quiet office, listening to the gentle breathing of her family through the house's nighttime stillness. Tomorrow, their carefully orchestrated departure would begin, an escape disguised as a vacation, a desperate bid for normalcy wrapped in the excitement of seeing the Pacific Ocean. Dawn broke over Cedar Mills with perfect clarity, the July sky promising another beautiful summer day. At 6:20 a.m., Lucas was already wide awake, bursting with anticipation as he shook his sister's shoulder. "Emma, wake up, it's vacation day," he whispered loudly, already dressed in his Superman t-shirt, the same one he'd worn the day before. Emma stirred, clutching Lily tightly as her eyes fluttered open. "Is it time to see the ocean?" she murmured sleepily. "Not today, but soon. Dad says we have to drive a bazillion miles first," Lucas replied, pulling her hand. "Come on, they're loading the car." Outside, Michael carefully arranged the last suitcase in the Explorer's cargo area, following his color-coded system. Green for Sarah, blue for himself, red for Lucas, purple for Emma, and the black bag for shared essentials. "That should do it," he said, closing the hatch. "Just need to double-check the trailer connection once more." At 7:05 a.m., Sarah moved silently through the empty house, her footsteps echoing in the already unfamiliar space. In each room she paused, ensuring nothing essential had been forgotten. When she reached the office, her fingers grazed the drawer where the thumb drive lay hidden. After a moment's hesitation, she turned away. Some insurance policies were best left untouched. "Ready?" Michael asked, keys jingling in his hand when she stepped onto the porch. Sarah nodded, securing the front door behind her. "As ready as we'll ever be." At 7:14 a.m., the Whitman family stood in their driveway with Diane, the morning sun glinting off the silver Airstream trailer attached to their Ford Explorer. The scene could have been a postcard for American suburban life, a smiling family embarking on a summer adventure. "Don't forget the orchid," Sarah reminded, pressing a key with a stethoscope-shaped keychain into Diane's palm. 3 ice cubes on Wednesday." "I've got it covered," Diane laughed, pulling Sarah into a tight hug. "Have an amazing time. Bring me back something tacky." Michael adjusted the rearview mirror, catching Lucas's excited wave from the back seat as they pulled away from number 247 Maple Street. Emma pressed her face, Against the window, Lily's fabric face squished alongside hers as they waved goodbye to the only home they'd ever known. At 8:30 a.m., they made their first stop at Judy's Diner just off Highway 26. Jerry, the aging server with a coffee-stained apron, smiled as Lucas carefully counted out change for a chocolate milk. "Keeping track of your vacation budget, young man?" Jerry asked, impressed by the boy's methodical approach. Lucas nodded seriously, tucking the remaining coins into his Superman wallet. "Dad says math is important, even on adventures." Back on the road by 9:15 a.m., Sarah took the wheel while Michael documented their journey with a compact camera. "Wave to the camera, explorers," he called to the back seat, capturing Emma's shy smile and Lucas's enthusiastic peace sign. At 10:15 a.m., a semi-truck driver returned Lucas's energetic waves by honking his horn, sending both children into fits of giggles. Sarah's knuckles whitened slightly on the steering wheel before relaxing, her smile returning as she caught Michael's reassuring glance. The family stopped for lunch at 12:40 p.m., spreading a checkered blanket at a roadside park with a view of distant mountains. Emma carefully positioned Lily on the picnic table, adjusting her pink dress. "She needs to see everything too," she explained seriously. "It's her first big trip." At 2:30 p.m., Michael called his department at the university from a rest stop payphone. "Yes, all final grades are submitted," he confirmed. "We'll be off-grid for sections of the trip, so don't worry if you can't reach me for a few days." His casual tone betrayed none of the tension that occasionally flickered behind his glasses. The Explorer crossed the state line into Idaho at 4:20 p.m., a middle-aged Border Patrol officer nodding appreciatively at their airstream. "Beautiful trailer you've got there. 2017 model?" "Good eye," Michael replied, handing over their identification. "We've had her for about 2 years now." At 7:42 p.m., the family pulled over beside the "Welcome to Idaho" sign, positioning themselves for the perfect vacation selfie. "Everyone say, adventure," Michael called as Sarah held out her phone. The resulting image, 4 smiling faces against the blue and white sign, was immediately sent to the family WhatsApp group. "Made it to Idaho," Sarah typed. "Kids have been amazing travelers, heading to Twin Falls for the night." At 8:15 p.m., Sarah leaned against the passenger seat, recording a voice message for her mother. "The kids are doing great, Mom. Lucas has been counting license plates from different states, and Emma's been drawing in her travel journal. We'll call from the hotel tomorrow when we get settled." As darkness fell, Michael consulted the GPS, frowning slightly at the fuel gauge. "We should make one more stop before the hotel. The tank's lower than I expected with all the hill climbing." At 9:30 p.m., Sarah's fingers nervously tapped against her thigh as Michael announced their need for a final stop. "There's a place called Horizon coming up in about 20 miles. We can fuel up there." At 10:37 p.m., security cameras at the Horizon gas station silently recorded the Ford Explorer pulling in, the silver Airstream trailer gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights. Michael stepped out, stretching briefly before inserting his credit card into the pump. Inside the small convenience store, Lucas tugged at Sarah's sleeve before a display of toy cars. "Mom, look, they have a Superman Special Edition." His eyes widened at the miniature car emblazoned with the iconic S symbol. Emma followed Sarah down the snack aisle. Lily clutched tightly in one hand as she pointed to a package of cookies with the other. The security camera captured their ordinary family moment in grainy, black and white detail. At 10:46 p.m., Michael entered the store to pay, exchanging brief pleasantries with the manager, Frank Miller. "Beautiful night for traveling," Miller commented, ringing up their purchases. "Sure is," Michael agreed, his eyes briefly meeting Sarah's across the store before returning to his wallet. At 10:53 p.m., the final security footage showed the family exiting together, carrying a bag of snacks and drinks. They climbed into the Explorer, headlights illuminating the empty highway as they pulled back onto Interstate 84, heading west into the darkness. As the Ford Explorer with the Airstream trailer disappeared from view, a dark van that had been parked in the shadows of the station's rear lot silently pulled out, following at a calculated distance, its headlights remaining off until it was well beyond the reach of the security cameras. The dark van maintained its distance as it followed the Whitman family's Explorer and Airstream down Interstate 84, disappearing into the night, a predator stalking its prey with calculated patience, unseen by the family who believed they were finally escaping danger. At 10:30 a.m. the next morning, Carol Reynolds stared at her silent phone during breakfast, the scrambled eggs growing cold on her plate. Sarah had promised to call when they reached their hotel in Twin Falls. Carol checked her call history again. No missed calls, no voicemails. Her daughter had never failed to check in during a trip, not once since moving to Cedar Mills 6 years ago. They probably got in late and didn't want to disturb me, she reasoned aloud to her empty kitchen. Sarah will call this morning. By 2:45 p.m., Carol's casual concern had evolved into persistent unease. She opened WhatsApp and typed, "Everything okay out there? Waiting to hear from you." The message showed delivered, but remained unread. Carol stared at the blue check mark, willing it to transform into the double blue that would indicate Sarah had seen it. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Carol found herself checking her phone every few minutes. At 8:14 p.m., she could no longer rationalize the silence. She dialed Sarah's number directly, her heart sinking when the automated voice announced, "The person you are trying to reach is unavailable. Please leave a message after the tone." "Sarah, honey, it's Mom. Just checking in since I haven't heard from you. Call me when you get this, no matter how late." Carol ended the call and immediately dialed Michael's number with the same result. She placed her phone on the kitchen counter, fingers drumming nervously beside it. "They must be in an area without signal," she whispered to herself, tamping down the anxious flutter in her chest. By 9:20 a.m. the following morning, Carol could no longer ignore her growing dread. She found the confirmation email for the Whitman's Hotel in Reno and dialed the number with trembling fingers. "Golden Valley Inn. How may I help you?" a cheerful receptionist answered. "Hello, I'm calling about my daughter's family, the Whitmans. They had a reservation for last night." Carol's voice remained steady despite her racing heart. After a brief pause and keyboard clicking, the receptionist responded, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but it looks like the Whitmans never checked in. The system has them marked as a no-show." The room seemed to tilt slightly as Carol thanked the receptionist and ended the call. She immediately opened her email, searching frantically for the detailed itinerary Sarah had shared, the famous green folder in digital form. With growing urgency, she examined every stop, every planned route, looking for alternative explanations. At 11:05 a.m., Carol printed the entire itinerary, highlighting the planned stops with a yellow marker. Something was wrong. Sarah's meticulous planning left no room for spontaneous diversions or missed check-ins. By early afternoon, Carol called Cedar Mills Memorial Hospital, where Sarah worked. "Hi, Janet, it's Carol Reynolds, Sarah's mom. Have you heard anything from Sarah in the last day or so?" "No," Sarah's colleague replied, concern evident in her voice. "I thought they'd be well on their way to California by now. Is everything okay?" "I'm sure it's fine," Carol said, not believing her own words. "If you hear from her, please ask her to call me immediately." As evening approached, Carol scoured local news websites from Idaho and Nevada, searching for reports of accidents along the routes the family should have traveled. The absence of any reports provided little comfort against the growing pit in her stomach. The following morning, at 9:45 a.m., Carol entered the Cedar Mills Police Department, a small, dated brick building with squeaky linoleum floors. Officer Jenkins, a heavy-set man with thinning hair and a perpetually bored expression, barely looked up from his computer as she approached the desk. "My daughter and her family have been missing for over 48 hours, Carol stated firmly, placing Sarah's itinerary on the counter. "They never reached their hotel and haven't contacted anyone." Officer Jenkins sighed, reaching for a standard form. "Names and ages?" "Sarah and Michael Whitman, 39 and 42. Their children Lucas and Emma, 8 and 6. Carol's voice cracked slightly on the children's names. "Ma'am," Jenkins began with unmistakable condescension. "Adults have the right to change their plans, especially on vacation. Perhaps they decided to take a detour. Carol pulled out her phone, displaying the final family selfie at the Idaho border. "My daughter has called me every night since she moved here 6 years ago. She would never go to bed without saying goodnight to her children by phone if they were away from her. Something is wrong." Despite her insistence, Jenkins completed the bare minimum paperwork without urgency, explaining that without evidence of foul play, there was little the department could do about adults who'd been missing less than 72 hours. Frustrated but undeterred, Carol returned home and spent the afternoon calling local congresspeople, determined to make someone listen. Tears streamed down her face as she explained the situation repeatedly, each call leaving her more desperate than the last. The following morning, Carol's persistence finally yielded results when Detective Robert Simmons, a 53-year-old veteran officer with salt and pepper hair and deep-set eyes that had witnessed too many tragedies, invited her to his office. "Tell me about your daughter's routines," he said, listening intently as Carol described Sarah's methodical nature and unwavering commitment to staying in touch. By afternoon, Simmons was at the local bank reviewing the Whitmans' financial records, confirming that no transactions had occurred after the 9053 payment at Horizon gas station. He then revisited the security footage with Frank Miller, the station manager, who shrugged dismissively. "Seemed like a normal family on a trip," Miller confirmed. "Nothing suspicious about them at all." By evening, Simmons had established a timeline in his office, pinning photos of the family on a corkboard, alongside markers indicating their last known whereabouts. A large map on the wall showed their planned route with a prominent question mark after the Idaho border. As Simmons reviewed the critical first 72 hours of the investigation without concrete leads, his phone rang. The detective's stomach dropped as the Idaho State Police officer on the other end described a child's drawing found abandoned at a remote rest area, a crayon sketch of a girl in a pink dress, signed in shaky, childish handwriting. "Emma Whitman, help." The simple drawing clutched in Detective Simmons' hand felt impossibly heavy. Emma Whitman's childish script pleaded for help from the glossy paper, transforming what had been a missing persons case into something far more urgent. He immediately called Carol with the news. By 7:15 a.m. the following morning, Simmons stood in the remote Idaho rest area where the drawing had been discovered, carefully examining the evidence now protected in a clear plastic evidence bag. The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty parking lot as he studied every detail of Emma's artwork. The pink dress, the oversized eyes, the unmistakable fear conveyed even in a child's simple lines. "Show me exactly where it was found," Simmons requested. Following the state trooper to a women's restroom entrance, the officer pointed to a low concrete barrier. It was wedged under this rock, folded once, almost like it was deliberately placed for someone to find. The implication hung in the crisp morning air. Emma or someone else had wanted this message discovered. Back at the makeshift command center, Simmons initiated a video call with Emma's art teacher in Cedar Mills. Mrs. Collins's face appeared on screen, worry etched across her features. "Yes, that's absolutely Emma's work," she confirmed without hesitation. "She always draws eyes that way, much larger than proportional. And the dress, it's always pink, just like her dolls. She signs her name with that distinctive capital E detective, is she?" "We're doing everything possible to find them," Simmons assured her, ending the call as the sound of helicopter rotors grew louder outside. By early afternoon, 3 police helicopters methodically scanned Interstate 84 and the surrounding terrain. Officers with binoculars searched for any glimpse of silver reflecting sunlight from a ravine or hidden area where a trailer might have gone off-road. The distinctive airstream would be difficult to conceal unless someone had deliberately hidden it. Near the rest area where Emma's drawing appeared, K9 units worked in expanding circles. One Belgian Malinois suddenly alerted near the parking lot's edge, pulling its handler toward the tree line before losing the scent where tire tracks suggested a vehicle had recently departed at speed. As evening approached, Carol stood before news cameras from 3 local stations, her voice remarkably steady despite her obvious distress. "Please," she said, holding up school photos of Lucas and Emma, "if anyone has seen my family, contact the police immediately." The tremor in her hands betrayed the composure in her voice. The following morning, Cedar Mills mobilized in support of the search. Diane Peterson and other neighbors transformed the Whitman's garage into a poster distribution center, methodically dividing regional maps into sectors to ensure complete coverage. "We need teams to cover these interstate exits," Diane instructed, her teacher's voice bringing order to the chaos of volunteers. 2 people per sector. Note the time and location where each poster is placed. While the community rallied, Simmons pursued official channels at Sarah's workplace. In the hospital's administrative offices, Sarah's supervisor scrolled through recent email exchanges. She was excited about coordinating the neonatal wing expansion when she returned, the woman explained, showing Simmons messages from Sarah containing detailed planning notes. "This doesn't look like someone planning to disappear voluntarily." By mid-afternoon, Simmons sat in Michael's university office, examining his calendar and computer, while a colleague shared his impressions. "Michael talked about this trip for months," the fellow professor confirmed, gesturing toward a stack of travel books on the desk. He was researching Pacific tide pools for a potential article. Nothing seemed unusual about his behavior. As July gave way to August and the investigation entered its 3rd week without substantial leads, pressure from media outlets and Carol's congressional contacts finally yielded federal assistance. Agent Marcus Reed of the FBI arrived at the Cedar Mills Police Department, his immaculate suit and serious expression contrasting with the small-town setting. "I've reviewed your initial findings," Reed said to Simmons after introductions. "Let's re-examine all possible routes they could have taken after Horizon." The 2 investigators spent hours analyzing maps, marking alternate routes in red, calculating fuel ranges, and identifying blind spots in traffic camera coverage. Reed's methodical approach complemented Simmons's intuitive investigative style, but neither could explain how a distinctive vehicle pulling a silver trailer could vanish so completely. Meanwhile, Carol spent increasing amounts of time in the Whitman home, preserving it exactly as the family had left it. Diane found her one afternoon sitting in Lucas's perfectly arranged bedroom, clutching an identical Superman t-shirt to the one he'd worn on departure day. "They're out there somewhere," Carol whispered, her eyes red-rimmed from constant crying. "I can feel it, but why can't they contact us? What happened to my babies?" 3 weeks after the disappearance, state authorities called a tense meeting to announce the suspension of aerial searches. Despite covering over 500 miles of potential routes, no trace of the Explorer or Airstream had been found. "We can't justify the continued resource expenditure without new information," the senior officer explained, as Carol protested vehemently, her composed facade finally cracking under the weight of mounting despair. That evening, Agent Reed meticulously reviewed toll booth camera footage from a 300-mile radius around the gas station, his frustration growing with each negative result. "It doesn't make sense," he muttered to Simmons. "A vehicle this distinctive can't just vanish. It's like they drove off the map entirely." Later that night, Simmons sat alone in his apartment, walls covered with case notes and timeline photos. When his phone rang at 11:20 p.m., Reed's voice carried an unusual urgency. "You need to see this immediately," the agent said. "We've completed the cell phone traffic analysis from the region." The analysis revealed something disturbing. The Whitman's phones were all shut down almost simultaneously at 10:58 p.m. that night, exactly 5 minutes after leaving Horizon gas station. But most perplexing was that according to the data, at that moment, they were traveling on a secondary road in the opposite direction from their planned route. Reed's revelation about the phones being shut down while traveling in an unexpected direction changed everything. Simmons stared at the data visualization on the screen, showing the Whitmans' last digital footprint on a rural side road that shouldn't have been part of their journey. They were heading away from their destination, Simmons muttered, tracing the secondary road with his finger. Something happened in those 5 minutes after they left Horizon. The following morning, Reed and Simmons returned to Horizon gas station, their shoes crunching on the gravel as they methodically walked the perimeter. This time they weren't looking at the obvious, the pumps, the store entrance, but at what might have been missed, blind spots, access roads, nearby surveillance possibilities. The cameras cover the main entrance and exit, Reed noted, pointing to the visible security equipment, but there's nothing monitoring that service road behind the property. Frank Miller emerged from the station, his posture stiffening when he spotted the investigators. "Didn't expect to see you back here," he said, nervously jingling coins in his pocket. "Just retracing steps," Simmons replied casually, studying Miller's reaction. "We're particularly interested in any additional security footage you might have, perhaps from cameras not mentioned previously." Miller's eyes darted briefly toward the station's back lot. "Already gave you everything. Standard 4-camera. Setup, nothing fancy." As Simmons continued questioning Miller, a white van pulled into the lot. Kevin Driscoll, a technician from Cedar Security Systems, began unloading equipment for what appeared to be an upgraded installation. "New security system?" Reed inquired, watching Miller's face carefully. "County required upgrades after those robberies last month," Miller explained, too quickly. While Miller assisted a customer, Reed approached Driscoll, flashing his credentials. "FBI, mind if I ask about the existing system before you replace it?" Driscoll, a lanky 29-year-old with a technical college lanyard still hanging from his belt, shrugged. "Sure, though there's not much to it. Basic setup pretty outdated." As Driscoll worked inside a utility closet, he called out suddenly, "Hey, that's weird. There's a distribution box here that's not on the diagram." His flashlight illuminated a dusty junction box connected to wiring that disappeared into the ceiling. By mid-afternoon, Driscoll had managed to trace the mysterious wiring to an unmarked camera positioned at the edge of the property, angled toward the service road. Using a laptop connected to an obsolete server, Reed, Simmons, and Driscoll huddled in the station's back room, attempting to recover footage from July 15th. "If this works," Simmons said, "we might finally see what happened after they pulled out." The recovered footage was grainy and degraded, but what it revealed sent a chill through the room. The Explorer with the Airstream could be seen stopping abruptly on the secondary road, approximately 300 meters from the main entrance. 4 figures in dark jackets approached the vehicle from the tree line. After approximately 2 minutes of activity that couldn't be clearly discerned, the Explorer and trailer proceeded in a different direction than originally planned, with a second vehicle, possibly a dark van, following closely behind. Simmons immediately confronted Miller in his small office. "We know you're hiding something," he said, placing the laptop showing the recovered footage on the desk. "This camera wasn't on the record. Why?" Miller's face drained of color as he stared at the screen. His composure crumbled rapidly, sweat beading on his forehead as he collapsed into his chair. "I just let them use my backlot for meetings," he blurted, voice breaking. "They paid me to shut off certain cameras at specific times. I never knew they'd do something like this to a family." A subsequent examination of Miller's bank records revealed irregular deposits ranging from $2,000 to $5,000 in the months before and after the Whitmans' disappearance, confirming his involvement in something far more sinister than a simple gas station operation. Early the next morning, a forensic team examined the roadside area where the interception occurred. Though nearly a month had passed, they discovered subtle tire tracks veering off into a rarely used Forest Service road, supporting what the footage had shown. At FBI headquarters, the investigation took an unexpected turn when a junior agent recognized a name from the Whitmans' background check. "Wait, Sarah Reynolds? From the PharmaCorp case?" he asked, pulling up a sealed federal file on his screen. "She was a key witness in a massive pharmaceutical fraud case about 10 years ago." Reed spent hours examining the unsealed court documents, revealing photographs of a younger Sarah testifying against pharmaceutical executives who had deliberately diluted cancer medications to increase profits. When Simmons shared this discovery with Carol that evening, her shock was palpable. "She never mentioned anything like this," Carol whispered, hands trembling. "I had no idea she was involved in something so significant." Further investigation into the PharmaCorp case revealed that Viktor Zelansky, the company's vindictive former CEO, had been released from federal prison for good behavior just 17 days before the Whitmans disappeared. Raymond Mercer, the financial director convicted in the same case, had gained parole 3 months earlier. That night, Simmons and Reed returned to the Whitman home with a new perspective, meticulously examining each room for signs of surveillance or prior threats. In Michael's home office, Simmons carefully checked furniture and fixtures, his trained fingers detecting something rigid hidden in the lining of a desk drawer, a thumb drive with a simple inscription, "If anything happens." When FBI technicians finally broke through the encryption on the drive, everyone in the room fell silent as the screen displayed a folder titled, "If Anything Happens," containing not only documents about Sarah's testimony against PharmaCorp, but also a series of anonymous threatening emails received in the weeks before their trip. "We know what you did. We know where to find you. And now, we know about your beautiful family too." The thumb drive's contents, projected on the wall of the FBI briefing room, cast harsh shadows across the faces of every agent present. The threatening emails displayed in stark text, "We know what you did. We know where to find you. And now, we know about your beautiful family, too." Agent Reed paced slowly before the screen, his expression grim as he digested the full implications of what they'd discovered. "This isn't just a missing persons case anymore," he announced to the assembled team early the next morning. "This is a calculated act of revenge, potentially years in the making." The expanded investigation team filled every chair in the conference room as Reed methodically presented the contents of the thumb drive. On screen, court photographs showed a younger Sarah Reynolds, her hair shorter, her face tense but determined, testifying against the PharmaCorp executives. Documents detailed the horrifying scope of their crimes. 57 cancer patients dead from deliberately diluted medications, all to increase the company's profit margins by an estimated $18 million annually. Sarah Whitman wasn't just a peripheral witness, Simmons explained to Carol later that morning, gently sliding the court transcripts across the table. She discovered the dilution scheme while working as a pharmacy technician, collected evidence at significant personal risk, and became the star witness for the prosecution. Carol's fingers trembled as she touched the photograph of her daughter on the witness stand. "Why wouldn't she tell me about this? We've always been so close." Reed carefully displayed the surveillance photos recovered from Michael's thumb drive. "These were taken over the past 3 months," he explained, pointing to images of Lucas exiting his elementary school, Emma in her ballet costume during a recital, and Michael and Sarah loading groceries into their car outside the local supermarket. "The angles vary significantly," noted an FBI analyst, indicating points on a digital map. "These photos required prolonged surveillance from multiple positions. Whoever was watching them was professional, patient, and thorough." Later that afternoon, Reed and Simmons pored over encrypted emails between Michael and an unnamed contact in California. The messages, carefully worded to appear innocuous to casual readers, clearly outlined preparations for a permanent relocation using the family vacation as cover. "They were planning to disappear," Simmons said quietly, "but someone got to them first." By the following morning, the FBI had expanded their investigation to include other witnesses from the PharmaCorp case. A disturbing pattern quickly emerged. 3 former witnesses had died under suspicious circumstances in recent months: a house fire attributed to electrical failure, an apparent suicide, and a fatal car accident on an empty road. "This wasn't classified as suspicious at the time," explained a forensic investigator, showing Reed the fire department report on the home of a former PharmaCorp accountant. "But look at these accelerant patterns. Classic arson disguised as an accident." The investigation accelerated when Maria Suarez, a 43-year-old former housekeeper for Victor Zelansky, nervously entered the Cedar Mills Police Department. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, her eyes constantly scanning the room as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. "I recognized him on the news," she explained in accented English, hands clutching her purse tightly. "I am afraid, but I must talk. The things he said when he drank." Reed and Simmons leaned forward as Suarez described her former employer's obsession with retribution. "He spoke of this property in Nevada when he was drinking," she recalled. "He called it his place of retribution. Said that's where real justice happened, away from courts and lawyers." Suarez's testimony proved invaluable as FBI analysts cross-referenced shell companies and property records. By evening, they had identified a remote rural complex in northeastern Nevada, approximately 40 kilometers from the nearest town, legally owned by an international corporation headquartered in the Cayman Islands. Satellite imagery revealed 3 structures: a main house, a modified barn, and a partially underground facility with its own generator. The property's isolation made it perfect for holding captives without risk of discovery. "The underground structure concerns me most," Reed noted during the strategic planning meeting with SWAT team leaders the next morning. "Based on Suarez's description, that's likely where Zelansky would keep anyone he wanted to interrogate." As federal and state agencies coordinated their approach to the property, determining access routes and tactical protocols, Carol Reynolds sat alone in her daughter's home, sorting through the day's mail. Among the bills and sympathy cards was a plain brown package with no return address. Her hands shook as she carefully opened the unmarked parcel. Inside, she found Lucas's Superman t-shirt, the one he'd been wearing when they departed, meticulously folded as if for display. A dark stain on one sleeve appeared to be dried blood. Carol's anguished cry brought her neighbor Diane running from next door. Together, they stared at the macabre delivery, its implications too horrible to verbalize. As dawn approached the next morning, the tactical teams made final preparations for the raid on Zelansky's Nevada property. Helicopter crews checked equipment, while ground units reviewed property layouts based on satellite imagery and Suarez's descriptions. The operation was minutes from launching when Detective Simmons received an urgent call from a small Nevada sheriff's office. Raymond Mercer, the former financial director of PharmaCorp, had stumbled into their station, his eyes bloodshot and hands trembling uncontrollably. "He's asking to speak with federal authorities about the Whitman family," the local sheriff explained. "Says he needs to confess. His exact words were, 'It wasn't supposed to be like this. Zelansky completely lost control. I need this to end. They're still there.'" Raymond Mercer sat hunched in the interrogation room, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained, bearing no resemblance to the confident financial executive who had once commanded boardrooms. His hands trembled uncontrollably as he poured out a confession that grew more horrifying with each detail. "It was supposed to scare her," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Make her feel what we felt when she took everything from us. 10 years in prison while she built a new life, a new family." Tears streamed down his hollow cheeks as he described the initial plan: to intercept the family, hold them briefly, make Sarah experience the fear of captivity, then release them with a warning never to feel safe again. Agent Reed leaned forward, his face pale as Mercer continued. But Zelansky, something broke in him during those years inside. He'd talk for hours about proper justice and equivalence of suffering. By the time he got out, the plan had evolved. Detective Simmons fought to maintain professional composure as Mercer described how they had studied the family's vacation route for months, identifying the perfect interception point near a cooperative gas station owner. "We knew exactly when and where to stop them," Mercer explained. "The children made it easier. Michael wouldn't resist with them in the car." The true horror emerged as Mercer described the bunker Zelansky had constructed specifically for his revenge. He designed 4 separate cells, one for each family member, audio systems so Sarah could hear the children crying, video feeds so she could see their suffering without being able to comfort them. Mercer's voice dropped to a barely audible whisper as he detailed Zelansky's macabre choice system. Every day he gave Sarah impossible decisions. Which child would receive food, which would get water, which would have a blanket for the night. He called it his experiment in maternal ethics. While Mercer's confession continued, tactical teams assembled at a forward post 10 kilometers from Zelansky's property. Agents checked weapons and communication equipment as Reed distributed layout diagrams based on Mercer's descriptions. The subterranean facility has 4 primary containment areas surrounding a central control room, he explained. Approach with extreme caution. We don't know if Zelansky still has armed personnel on site. As dawn broke, painting the desert landscape in shades of pink and gold, 3 helicopters lifted off, while armored vehicles advanced along dusty secondary roads. Agents verified GPS coordinates, their faces grim with the knowledge of what they might find. Reconnaissance drones provided real-time footage of the property, transmitting images of 3 structures exactly as satellite photos had shown: the abandoned-looking main house, the modified barn, and the bunker entrance partially hidden by artificial landscaping. SWAT teams established a perimeter, communicating via radio as they approached the structures in synchronized formation. The property appeared deserted, no vehicles visible, no signs of recent activity around the main buildings. Behind the barn, agents discovered the Whitman's Airstream trailer concealed beneath a camouflage tarp, its once gleaming silver exterior now dust-covered. Inside, the trailer remained meticulously preserved, like a grotesque museum exhibit. Family photos still displayed, children's toys arranged on bunks, vacation clothes hanging untouched. The tactical team descended into the bunker with practiced efficiency, night vision equipment revealing a sophisticated underground facility. In the central control room, they found Viktor Zelansky sitting calmly in an office chair before multiple monitors displaying empty cells. The 64-year-old former pharmaceutical executive made no attempt to resist, as weapons were trained on him. "I was wondering how long it would take," he remarked casually, his eyes flickering briefly to the monitors. "I assume Mercer talked." Reed and Simmons arrived 30 minutes later, donning protective gear before entering the bunker. The control room revealed the full scope of Zelansky's obsession. Walls covered with surveillance photos, timelines, and documents detailing every aspect of the Whitmans' lives over the past 5 years. The monitoring system connected to 4 separate cells, each labeled with a family member's name. The rooms themselves were now empty, their sparse furnishings, a thin mattress, a metal toilet, a single light fixture, evidence of the deliberate deprivation imposed on their occupants. In an adjacent room, investigators discovered what could only be described as a trophy collection, personal items from each family member preserved with museum-like precision. Lucas's Superman t-shirt, Emma's ballet dresses, Sarah's stethoscope, Michael's glasses, each item labeled and dated. When Simmons directly asked Zelansky where the family was, the man smiled enigmatically. "Detective, the point was never simply to kill them. The point was to make her experience true loss, day after day, moment after moment. I lost my freedom for 10 years. She needed to lose everything, gradually, knowing it was her fault." By mid-morning, cadaver dogs deployed across the property, alerted repeatedly near a small wooded area at the property's edge. Forensic teams began careful excavation, uncovering the first of 4 unmarked graves. The medical examiner confirmed the grim discovery. This appears to be a child, approximately 6 to 8 years old. Further excavation revealed the family's tragic fate. Based on preliminary examinations and Zelansky's detailed records, Lucas had been the first to die after 3 weeks in captivity, succumbing to untreated pneumonia. Emma had survived 2 more weeks. Michael, kept in total isolation, had endured almost 2 months before finally surrendering to deliberate dehydration. Sarah, forced to witness her family's suffering, had been the last to die, after 112 days of psychological torture. When investigators discovered a locked laptop in the bunker office, a forensic technician accessed it within minutes, revealing contents that made the experienced Detective Simmons turn away to vomit. A detailed journal kept by Zelansky, documenting not only the psychological torture of the Whitman family, but also a list of 5 other PharmaCorp witnesses he planned to visit in the coming months. The contents of the laptop sent shockwaves through even the most hardened members of the investigation team. Several agents requested temporary leave after reviewing portions of Zelansky's meticulously documented experiment. The journal entries, clinical and devoid of empathy, detailed daily procedures and observations, as if the family's suffering were merely scientific data points. In the autopsy room's harsh fluorescent lighting, the medical examiner dictated his findings in a voice that occasionally faltered despite his professional detachment. Male juvenile subject, approximately 8 years of age, exhibits severe malnourishment, consistent with extended captivity. Primary cause of death appears to be untreated bilateral pneumonia, with contributing factors of dehydration and hypothermia. Each subsequent examination revealed a similar pattern of deliberate neglect, carefully calibrated to prolong suffering without causing immediate death. Emma's small body showed evidence that she had survived nearly 2 weeks after her brother, desperately scratching tallies into the concrete wall of her cell with a loose screw she had somehow obtained. Reed and Simmons presented their findings to the federal prosecutor via secure video link, their faces drawn from lack of sleep. On screen, photographs of the bunker facility elicited visible shock from the veteran prosecutor, who had thought himself immune to human cruelty after 2 decades of service. "This goes beyond any case in my experience," the prosecutor admitted, reviewing the evidence summary. "We'll pursue every possible charge against all involved parties." Forensic technicians worked in shifts, cataloging hundreds of hours of video footage from the bunker. Many found themselves requesting brief breaks, stepping outside to breathe deeply before returning to their grim task. The recordings documented not only the physical deterioration of the Whitman family, but also Zelansky's methodical psychological torture, forcing Sarah to choose which family member would receive basic necessities each day. A specialized financial investigator traced an intricate web of offshore payments connecting various accomplices, former inmates who served as guards, a disgraced physician who remotely monitored the victims' vital signs to ensure their suffering was optimized without premature death, and numerous others who provided logistical support. By mid-afternoon, FBI agents surrounded a discreet medical clinic outside Las Vegas. Dr. Harold Weiss, once a respected oncologist before losing his license for opioid fraud, was arrested while attempting to flee through a rear exit. His computer contained detailed health monitoring data on all 4 Whitman family members, with clinical notes suggesting methods to prolong their suffering while preventing death. Working with Interpol, authorities located Philip Crane at an exclusive Panamanian resort where he had been living under an assumed identity. The third PharmaCorp executive had never directly participated in the captivity, but had provided substantial funding and logistical support. His devices, seized during the arrest, contained encrypted communications with Zelansky spanning several years. The following morning, Zelansky appeared at his first court hearing wearing an orange prison jumpsuit that contrasted sharply with his calm demeanor. The judge, visibly disturbed by the preliminary evidence summary, denied bail with unusual language for a judicial proceeding. The depravity exhibited in these alleged acts suggests a danger to society rarely witnessed in this court. In a separate holding area, Raymond Mercer met with his attorney to sign a cooperation agreement in exchange for a reduced sentence. His hands trembled so violently that he required 3 attempts to sign his name. "I just want them to have a proper burial," he whispered. "Their families deserve that much." Detective Simmons faced the most difficult task of his career when he visited Carol Reynolds to explain what they had discovered. Sitting beside her in the Whitman living room, he gently held her hand as she insisted on knowing the complete truth about her family's fate. Lucas was brave until the end, Simmons told her, relaying details from Mercer's testimony. The guards reported that he would sing to Emma through the wall between their rooms when she was frightened. Outside the Whitman home, neighbors created an impromptu memorial on the front lawn. Diane coordinated the placement of flowers, stuffed animals, and drawings from Lucas and Emma's classmates, each item a testament to the lives that had touched their small community. 3 days later, federal agents escorted 4 flag-draped coffins onto the plane that would return the Whitman family to Cedar Mills. A small honor guard assembled at the airport, standing at attention as the remains were loaded, a gesture of respect for victims of what was now classified as domestic terrorism. On the day of the funeral, Cedar Mills completely shut down. Stores closed with black banners hanging in windows, streets lined with blue ribbons, Sarah's favorite color, as the funeral procession moved slowly through town. The university canceled classes, the hospital postponed all non-emergency procedures, and the elementary school held a special assembly to help students process their grief. Nearly 1,000 people gathered at the cemetery, standing shoulder to shoulder in silent solidarity. Hospital colleagues in scrubs, university faculty in academic regalia, elementary school children clutching handmade cards, all united in grief for a family that embodied the best of their community. Carol, physically supported by assistants as she approached the graveside, somehow found the strength to place Emma's restored doll and Lucas's cleaned Superman shirt with her grandchildren. "They're finally together again," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the gentle wind. 3 weeks after the funeral, as the community struggled to move forward, the federal prosecutor's office called Reed and Simmons to an urgent and disturbing meeting. Forensic digital analysis had discovered, on a remote server accessed through Zelansky's computer, evidence that the revenge scheme may have involved an additional conspirator still at large, someone with access to privileged information from the original case that was never made public. The digital evidence suggesting an additional conspirator shattered any sense of closure the investigators had begun to feel. Reed and Simmons exchanged troubled glances across the prosecutor's office as they reviewed the encrypted files recovered from the remote server. "These documents contain sealed testimony," Reed observed, pointing to highlighted sections on his tablet. "Information that was redacted from public records, details about Sarah's original statement that only a handful of people should have known." The investigation entered a new phase, with a smaller, more discreet team assigned to review the original PharmaCorp case files. Reed and Simmons traveled to Washington, D.C., where they spent hours in a windowless conference room surrounded by cardboard boxes containing the decade-old prosecution materials. "We need to identify everyone who had access to the sealed portions of Sarah's testimony," Simmons said, methodically creating a list as they examined the documentation. 2 retired federal prosecutors who had worked the original case joined them, providing context for the complex legal proceedings that had unfolded years earlier. By afternoon, they had narrowed the potential leak to a small circle: the 3 convicted executives, 2 attorneys who had represented PharmaCorp, and Theodore Hamilton, the judge who had presided over the case. The judge's name was circled twice on Simmons's notepad. "Hamilton retired 3 years after the trial with full benefits," Reed noted, pulling up the judge's biography on his laptop. "Purchased a substantial property in Scottsdale shortly afterward." The forensic computer analyst demonstrated the sophisticated encryption methods used to share the confidential information, tracing digital breadcrumbs through various dark web channels. "Whoever provided this data had significant legal knowledge," she explained. "They knew exactly which details would be most valuable to Zelansky's revenge planning." Later that day, Simmons created an evidence board in their temporary office, placing photographs of everyone involved in the original case. He drew a red circle around the small group with access to the confidential information: the executives, the 2 attorneys, and Judge Hamilton. The following morning, agents discreetly verified the alibis of both attorneys. The first had been hospitalized for cardiac surgery during the critical period when the information was shared. His presence documented extensively in medical records. The second had taken a Mediterranean cruise, his activities well documented in social media photos with time and location stamps. That left Theodore Hamilton, now 72 years old, living comfortably in a gated Arizona community. Reed's background investigation revealed a lifestyle significantly more lavish than his judicial pension could support: a 7,000-square-foot desert estate, memberships in exclusive clubs, frequent international travel. His finances don't add up, observed a financial analyst, reviewing Hamilton's records. These accounts in the Cayman Islands received substantial deposits coinciding exactly with Zelansky's release dates and the disappearance timeline. While the investigation into Hamilton proceeded quietly, the trial of Zelansky and his accomplices dominated national headlines. Legal experts debated the boundaries of insanity defense versus calculated evil on 24-hour news channels. Mental health professionals analyzed the psychological profile of a man who could document human suffering with such clinical detachment. The courtroom filled to capacity each day, journalists competing for limited seats as Mercer testified as part of his plea agreement. He avoided looking at Zelansky while describing how the revenge plan had developed gradually during prison visits over years. Zelansky would talk about balancing scales, Mercer testified, his voice barely audible, about how Sarah needed to experience loss in slow motion, the way he experienced his own downfall. A forensic psychiatrist later took the stand, explaining to the jury that Zelansky's meticulous record-keeping indicated full awareness of his actions. The level of planning, the detailed documentation, these aren't the behaviors of someone disconnected from reality. The defendant knew exactly what he was doing. While public attention focused on the courtroom drama, Carol Reynolds avoided the media spectacle entirely. Instead, she channeled her grief into establishing the Whitman Foundation. Meeting with attorneys and financial advisors, she created bylaws, focusing on improving witness protection programs and support resources for families of missing persons. Sarah would want something meaningful to come from this, she explained to Diane as they reviewed the Foundation's mission statement. Something that might prevent another family from experiencing what we did. In the town park, the mayor presided over a simple ceremony, planting 4 oak saplings in a circle around a bronze plaque bearing the Whitman family's names. The entire community gathered as each tree was placed in the soil, representing Lucas, Emma, Michael, and Sarah, separate but forming a unified whole. At the hospital where Sarah had worked, Diane hung a dedication plaque in the newly renovated neonatal wing, now named the Sarah Whitman Maternal Child Center. Nurses who had worked alongside Sarah stood silently, many wiping away tears as the simple ceremony concluded. By evening, Reed received a confidential call from his financial intelligence contact. "We've confirmed indirect transfers from Hamilton to 5 different accounts associated with Zelansky's accomplices," the analyst reported. The payments began shortly after Zelansky's parole hearing and continued through the Whitman's abduction period. Reed and Simmons worked late into the night preparing documentation for search and arrest warrants, building an airtight case against the former judge. "A judge betraying his oath," Simmons remarked, shaking his head. "Maybe the worst criminal of all." On the morning when federal agents prepared to arrest former Judge Hamilton at his Arizona mansion, they found the property strangely silent, the front door unlocked, and in the luxurious office, the body of the retired magistrate in a pool of blood. Beside it, a thumb drive with a handwritten note. "For Sarah's mother, the complete truth she deserves to know." The thumb drive found next to Hamilton's body contained his comprehensive confession, a digital testament of corruption and complicity that began long before the Whitman family's tragedy. FBI technicians extracted video files showing the former judge speaking directly to the camera, his judicial composure abandoned as he detailed how PharmaCorp executives had bribed him years earlier to ensure lighter sentences. "I compromised everything I claimed to stand for," Hamilton confessed in the video, his once authoritative voice now trembling with the weight of his sins. "They paid me to manipulate the system, to protect them even as they were convicted. When Zelensky contacted me after his release, I saw another opportunity for profit." Hamilton explained how he had provided privileged information from the sealed case files, including Sarah's protected witness statements and personal details the prosecution had deliberately kept confidential. "I never imagined the extent of what he planned," Hamilton admitted, his eyes reflecting horror as he described viewing the bunker footage that Zelensky had proudly shared with him. "When I saw what happened to those children, what he did to that family, I couldn't live with myself anymore." The digital confession provided the final pieces to the complex puzzle of conspiracy. Printed copies were included in the evidence presented during the remaining days of Zelensky's trial, further cementing the prosecution's case against the remaining conspirators. In the federal courthouse a week later, Zelensky remained impassive as the judge pronounced his sentence. For the premeditated abduction, torture, and murder of the Whitman family, this court sentences you to 5 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. The judge added, "May you spend every day of your remaining life reflecting on the immeasurable suffering you inflicted on innocent victims, including 2 children whose lives had barely begun." Mercer, owing to his eventual cooperation, received a reduced sentence of 30 years. As he was led from the courtroom, he paused near where Carol sat and spoke the only words that seemed to contain genuine remorse during the entire proceedings. "Nothing I say can change what happened. But I want you to know that your daughter never gave up. Until the very end, she believed someone would find them. She died loving her children and trying to protect them." Carol's face remained still as she absorbed his words, neither accepting nor rejecting them, simply acknowledging the small, cold comfort they might provide. 3 months after the conclusion of the trial, Cedar Mills began the slow process of healing its collective wounds. The university established the Michael Whitman Humanities Scholarship for students demonstrating excellence in literature. The elementary school renamed its library the Lucas and Emma Whitman Learning Center, filling it with books about adventure, space exploration, and ballet, subjects the children had loved. After much consideration, Carol decided to sell the Whitman family home, unable to reconcile the happy memories it contained with the knowledge of what had happened to its owners. She channeled the proceeds into establishing the Whitman Foundation headquarters in a small office downtown, focusing her energy on improving witness protection protocols and developing resources for families of missing persons. "We need to ensure that vital information isn't lost in transitions between agencies," she explained during a meeting with state legislators. "Sarah fell through the cracks when her protection ended. No other family should face that vulnerability." Diane Peterson emerged as the Foundation's most effective spokesperson, traveling across the country to educate communities about family safety and how to recognize signs of predatory surveillance. Her presentations, built around the Whitman case but focusing on positive preventative measures, gave grieving community members a way to channel their sorrow into action. On the first anniversary of the family's disappearance, Cedar Mills observed a day of remembrance. The 4 oak trees planted in the memorial, now noticeably taller, provided a focal point for community reflection. Residents placed flowers, photos, and handwritten notes around the saplings throughout the day, many staying to share memories of the family who had embodied the best of their small community. 3 years after the tragedy, Carol granted a rare interview to a documentary filmmaker creating an educational series about witness protection reform. They sat in the memorial garden, morning light filtering through the growing oak trees as Carol held a well-worn family photo album on her lap. "The hardest truth to accept," she reflected, turning pages that captured frozen smiles from happier times. is that Sarah carried that fear alone for years, trying to protect everyone around her by not sharing her past. Perhaps if we had known, we could have helped somehow. Pausing on a photograph of Lucas and Emma building sandcastles during their last family vacation before the ill-fated trip, she added, "The most difficult lesson is that there's no absolute protection in this world. We can only love completely while we have the chance." That's what Sarah did. She loved her family intensely every day until the end. As the interview concluded, Carol shared the ritual she had developed, visiting the Four Oaks every Sunday morning, regardless of weather, to tell her loved ones about the week that had passed. "I don't believe they can literally hear me," she explained with a sad smile, "but telling their stories keeps them alive in some way. As long as someone remembers how Lucas laughed, how Emma danced, how Michael and Sarah looked at each other, they'll never completely disappear." As Carol left the memorial that Sunday morning, she noticed something she hadn't perceived before. The four oak trees, planted in a circle, had grown in such a way that their upper branches had begun to intertwine against the sky, like fingers gently touching, separate at their roots, but united above, just as she believed her family now would be, somewhere beyond the suffering that had separated them from this world.